and welcome to Dr. G's Technique of the Week, Geometry Edition. Today we're going to be reviewing triangle congruence criteria, which are the sets of minimal amounts of information about two triangles that we need in order to prove that those two triangles are congruent. To practice with these congruence criteria, we're going to be using this set of triangles. So as we work through them, please keep in mind that I drew these triangles and badly, so we can't use as part of our reasoning for two triangles being congruent that two sides look like they're the same length or that two angles look like they have the same measure. Because maybe they do and maybe they don't. Instead, we need to use the information that is given to us on each diagram. So recall that if we have matching markings on a side of a figure, like one dash here and one dash here, that tells us that those sides are in fact congruent, or two dashes here, two dashes here, that tells us that those sides are in fact congruent. Same thing for angles. If we have one marking in the angle, that tells us those two angles are congruent. If we have instead three markings in an angle, that tells us that those two angles are congruent to each other. So let's start with our first congruence criterion, which is side, side, side. We abbreviate this SSS, which stands for side, side, side. In order to use the side, side, side congruence criterion to say that two triangles are in fact congruent to each other, we need to know that all three sides in one triangle are congruent to their corresponding side in another triangle. So looking at these 9 triangles, try and find the two triangles that we could say to be congruent by side, 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 since we can find 3 pairs of congruent sides between them. Alright, so knowing that we need 3 sides, we look and see triangle ABC here does have 3 sides that we have information on, and we can notice that this triangle here in the center, we also have 3 sides with information about them, and we can see one matching pair of sides with a single dash, a matching pair of sides with a double dash, and a matching pair of sides with a triple dash. So these 2 triangles are going to be congruent by side, side, side. And I can write a congruent statement about them. When I do that, I need to be careful about how I name my 2 triangles. So I name my first triangle ABC. Side AB is the side with 1 dash. And then side BC is the side with 2 dashes. And that's the way that I named it in that order, A to B to C, in the name of my triangle. So I need to make sure that I match that naming convention with my second triangle. So I want to go from N to O to M, since that goes along the side with 1 dash, like AB, and then along the side with 2 dashes, like BC. So NOM needs to be my name for my second triangle. Now let's move to our second congruence criterion, which is side, angle, side, abbreviated SAS. To use the side, angle, side congruence criterion, we need to know 2 pairs of congruent sides between our 2 triangles, and the angle between those 2 known sides in each triangle, those angles need to be congruent to each other as well. So take a moment looking at these 9 triangles, try and find 2 that we can say are congruent using side, angle, side. Alright, looking at this particular set of triangles, I see a few triangles that include side and angle information. This one here, middle of the top row, has 2 sides labeled with some angle information on the angle that is in between those 2 sides. So I'm going to look for another triangle that also has 2 sides labeled and an angle between those 2 sides, and I find that here on the right. And then I can check my angles are marked as congruent, and the sides on either side of them are also marked as congruent. These 2 with a single dash and these 2 with a double dash. So now I'm ready to write my congruence statement. Triangle DEF for my first one, And then again, when I write the name of my second triangle, I need to make sure that I match my naming convention that I followed in the first one. So D is at the marked angle. In this triangle, that angle is Q, so I want to start with Q. And then E is on the other end of the line, of the side that has one line marking it. In this case, that's R, so R is going to be my second corner, and then finally P. So this would be congruent to QRP. Now for our third congruence criterion, which is angle side angle, abbreviated ASA. For this criterion, we need to know two pairs of angles that are congruent between the two triangles, and the side in between those two angles needs to also be congruent to the corresponding side in the other triangle. So take a moment, looking at this set of triangles, try and find two that we can say are congruent using angle side angle. All right, we have a few triangles that have two angles on one side labeled, so we were going to look for ones where we have information about the side in between the two angles. So for example, at the top right, we have two angles with information about them, and we know something about the side in between those two angles. And if we look here down at the bottom center, we see again two angles that also match these. So we have W being congruent to angle H, angle V being congruent to angle I, and HI being congruent to WV, since they have the same markings. Again, we're going to be very careful when we write our congruence statement. So if I call this triangle GHI, G is my unlabeled angle here corresponding to X. So I'm going to make sure to put X next. H is the angle with only one marking. In this triangle it's W, so I'll put W second and then V. And finally, this brings us to our fourth congruence criterion for today, which is angle side. So this is very related to the angle side angle congruence criterion. We still have two angles that are congruent, but the side is now outside of those two angles, not in between them. We just need to make sure that that labeled side is in the same position relative to those two angles in each triangle. So take a moment to look at these triangles, try and find a pair that have two congruent angles, just like for the angle side angle pair, but their pair of congruent sides is not in between those two angles. All right, so we have a few possibilities here. This triangle at the bottom right has two labeled angles and a side that is not in between them, as does bottom left and this one here also on the left. So we want to look at which one has the congruent angles and congruent side lengths. So we see a matching single angle in all three, a matching triple marked angle in all three as well. So our angles actually work out in all of the triangles, but if I want to match something with this triangle, I see a double marked side here that is outside next to the single marked angle. In this triangle, I see the same, that double marked side next to the single marked angle, and that then allows me to write my congruent statement for Y ZA prime being congruent to triangle LJK. Now it's time for you to get some practice with these new ideas. See you next time on Dr. G's Technique of the Week.